coordinates. The chair of the bylaw review committee is going to go through everything for you, but I just wanted to make a couple of points. The other reason we're doing this is while we're at it and we're looking at these, we've proposed some new bylaws and we've proposed some revisions that aren't related to Mass General Law or the Charter, but we've noticed that there are some issues that need to be resolved, and now's the time to do that. And just to give you two examples, the Finance Committee has a bylaw right now that states that they shall have representation from each of the precincts. Well, that becomes very difficult to fill vacancies on the Finance Committee if we don't have any applicants from those precincts. So the Finance Committee has gone with a couple of seats not filled for quite some time. Fortunately, we do have a recent appointee to that committee, but we're proposing to change the language in that section of the bylaw to say that every effort shall be made to appoint somebody from every precinct in town, so it doesn't bind the hands of the Board of Selectmen or the Finance Committee from filling those important vacancies. So just want to mention what the process is and then turn it over to Mark Moss, who's the chair of the committee. The committee has been in existence for over 3 years, and they've been working on this steadily for 3 years with all the department heads, division heads, town council, and the town moderator. From here, this is the second of 2 public hearings. From here, we have a joint meeting of the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen coming up sometime at the end of February, I believe. And on February 23rd, the Board of Selectmen will be taking a vote to have a special town meeting on March 24th, at which point they will open the warrant, and the draft bylaws as an article will be submitted for the warrant. Following the town meeting vote in March, if approved, the bylaws would be sent to the Attorney General's office for review. So that's the process. I'm going to turn it over for details to Mark. I want to make sure that I thank Mark for the great job he's done as chair and thank all the committee members. This has been a long time. You've put in so much work, and we're so happy to have you volunteering to do this. You're not done yet. We still got some things to go. And I also want to make sure that I thank all the department and division heads who put, again, 3 years worth of work into this, and to thank particularly Town Council Bob Hennigan and Town Moderator Charlie Baker, because they've just done a great job on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Town Manager. So we're going to do a short presentation. The Bylaw Review Committee would like to thank the following people for their contributions to this bylaw process: Town Manager, Chief Financial Officer, Town Clerk, Town Planner, Board of Selectmen members, Fire Chief, Police Chief, DPW Director, Department of Development and Inspectional Services Acting Director, Town Moderator, Finance Committee, Town Council, all participating department staff members, and the IT department. And thank you for coming this evening. The first Public Bylaw Committee meeting was held August 29, 2011. Tonight's public hearing is the 14th public meeting held by the committee members since that inception date. Only the general bylaws were acted on. Zoning bylaws were not changed. Some of the issues surrounding the general bylaws: the bylaws were disorganized, they did not follow the revised town charter, and did not correspond with the reorganization and restructuring of departments and positions within municipal government, such as the Department of Public Works. Sections were obsolete or outdated. The bylaw PDF was cumbersome and not easily cross-referenced. Zoning bylaws are a continuation and create an even larger document and a confusing index. In the current bylaws, there are 8 separate references to dogs. Enforcement authority for violations of bylaw were ambiguous and confusing. This called much of the enforcement action into question. Fees and fines lacked consistency, were missing or outdated. References to reorganized positions such as highway surveyor, town administrator, executive secretary, and dog officer required revision. Stormwater management. The general bylaw titled Stormwater Management was actually in the zoning bylaw section. It was revised and now has its own section under the Department of Public Works DPW Director. One of the more important sections of the bylaw as a matter of written public policy is licensing. Those sections were outdated and in need of complete revision. Many of the existing Town of Auburn bylaws are grounded in established law and are functional. The committee kept those sections and moved them forward for update and incorporation. The committee divided the general bylaws into two distinct headings, administration and departments and divisions. These divided into chapters, sections, subsections, and sub-subsections for easy reference. An easy way to think of it is simply administrative and operational. It somewhat breaks down that way. These are the administrative chapters. And these are the department and division chapters. In stormwater management, chapter 9 is you can see it's one of the divisions. Reorganization, the committee reviewed each section of the bylaw and if obsolete, discarded it. News racks, for example, if a section needed minor corrections such as a descriptive title change from highway surveyor to Department of Public Works director, we made those corrections and then placed those sections either in administration or departments and divisions. News racks took up 3 pages of the current bylaws, so they've been deleted. In response to past technical difficulties updating fees or fines for violations, the committee created the concept of so-called fee schedule and fine schedule. This concept involves 2 spreadsheets separated from the bylaws and the traffic rules and regulations that the Board of Selectmen will now be authorized to amend. The fees and fine schedule under the purview of the Board of Selectmen will offer the following: an annual review, or as needed, of all bylaw-related fees and fines. A vote of town meeting will no longer be required for setting or amending fees and fines and are intentionally omitted from the bylaw document. Any new bylaw adopted or deleted at town meeting will be added or dropped to the fee or fine schedule as needed. Under licensing, contiguously, a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen wrote and the Board of Selectmen ultimately adopted licensing policies for public garages, pawnbroker, secondhand, unregistered motor vehicles, amusement parks, taxi licensing, carrying alcohol, which was formerly juice bars, transient vendor, and amusement devices. Because the Board of Selectmen adopted those licensing policies, the committee deleted them from the bylaws. A legacy reference to those licensing policy remains to direct the reader to the Board of Selectmen for those licenses and refers to the fees and fine schedule. The Bylaw Review Committee, through Town Administration, distributed sections to the department heads and their staff. They were tasked with amending, updating, and drafting bylaw pertinent to the effective function of their departments and divisions. Committee members then held several meetings and reviewed all returned material. Upon completion of a committee draft, the committee offered that draft to town council and then met with him at town hall with department heads, excuse me, staff members and other participants for review as frequent new draft iterations were created. His office review of this document included format, indexing, table of contents, consistent language, removing gender-specific language, and legal content, etc. Meetings were then held with each respective department head and other contributors to review the most updated material. Several meetings were held with the town moderator, who assisted the committee to ensure consistent grammatical structure and punctuation. On January 5th, the Bylaw Review Committee met and approved a draft proposal and voted to hold these public hearings with snow dates, and we used them both. After these hearings, all participants will have a period of time to review and finalize their sections for the committee's final review prior to special town meeting. So it's our belief that these bylaws are consistent with Auburn's town charter and the municipal reorganization plan. The bylaws are consistent with Mass General Law. The bylaws regulate certain financial operations of the town and are updated. These bylaws, using the committee's recommended design, are organized both administratively and operationally. The fees and fine schedules are being created now. Department heads and staff brought their expertise to their respective sections, and this design allows future town meeting to easily make amendments as operating procedures, environmental, social, technological, and legal conditions change. At the last hearing, a resident asked if we could have a bylaw to prevent parking in front of a driveway. And the answer to that is, in the traffic rules and regulations contain the following parking prohibition: upon or in front of any private road or driveway. So upon passage and implementation of these bylaws, which contain traffic rules and regulations, and the placement of a fine in the fine schedule, the police will then be able to enforce that bylaw. Currently, we can't. This is the date and time for the anticipated special town meeting in March. And the town's IT department is assisting the committee by creating a web-based framework with hyperlinks for ease of review and consistent with the town's website. So we're going to put that presentation of the current draft bylaws on the PowerPoint projector. It's a reasonable facsimile of what we anticipate them to look like. However, this version may contain errors as the IT department developed this for your review and evaluation tonight. The controlling document that we're using for this process is the committee-approved bylaw draft copy dated December 15th of last year. How'd that get in there? So that would be our presentation. So we will now hear from the department heads relative to their sections. They've been allotted up to 5 minutes to brief you. At the completion of each section, we will open the floor to questions for about 10 minutes. If a comment or question segment goes over the 10 minutes, we'll place that section on hold. Time allowing, we'll return to it at the end of the hearing. During the public comment and questions portion of the hearing, if you have a question, please raise your hand so I can recognize you. When you are recognized, and come up to the microphone. Please state your name and address for the record. And please save any questions you may have for the committee itself for last. We'll start with Ed Casanovich, Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Mark. Are you sure we're only entitled to a 5-minute time limit?
That's it. You shut it down after that.
Oh. Before I get started, Mr. Challen, did you have some words you wanted to say, or? Okay. Thank you, everyone. If I could focus your attention on Chapter 6 of the proposed and recommended bylaws. For the most part, under financial affairs, the existing bylaws were updated to conform with the adopted charter by town meeting and legislative action on in 2009. Most of the existing bylaws remained. There have been a few that have been removed. For instance, disposal of personal property currently under Section 9 of Chapter 5 under Financial Affairs, addressing the disposal of personal property. We are, since there is an MGL in place under Chapter 30B that allows for provisions of disposal of personal property, we are prescribing to the provisions of that chapter. Therefore, to have a general bylaw would be somewhat redundant. Under Section 6.02, mileage, under the existing bylaws, there is a joint vote by the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee that annually sets that rate. We thought it would be should be amended to reflect the Chief Financial Officer make a recommendation based upon the published IRS reimbursement allowed that's published annually by the Internal Revenue Service. Under Chapter 7, Capital Improvement Program, under 7.02, we are recommending in item number 4, under the definition of capital project, we are recommending that the threshold or the minimum recommendation of $5,000, which is currently in place, be changed to $10,000, with a life expectancy of greater than 3 years. This recommendation is being proposed to better manage our debt ratio, assume some of our smaller capital expense through the operational side of the budget. We do have a 5-year plan in place, which currently makes a recommendation through FY 2020. That will not change. All of those recommendations will remain in place for those capital items that have a $5,000 value. So that will take place in FY 2021 if adopted. Also, at the last meeting, we proposed some changes to 7.03 for capital budgeting process. Under item 1, we are recommending the removal of the language Board of Selectmen, and that is being proposed to be consistent with the language that is in the present charter. We are asking, also presented at the last meeting, the entire removal of item 2, which reads the Board of Selectmen shall review the submitted CIP, make such changes as they deem in the best interest of the town, and submit their recommendations to the Finance Committee. We are recommending removal of that, also to be consistent with the language of the charter as well. And under item number 3, we are proposing that we remove the language and the recommendations of the Board of Selectmen, once again to be consistent with the language and conform to the present charter. And Mark, that concludes my comments relative to financial affairs.
Anyone have any questions of the chief financial officer? There being none, thank you, sir. Chief Lucas, you're up.
Thank you very much. Historically, the current bylaws have exasperated every prior police chief and every supervisor that has worked at the Auburn Police Department for as long as I can personally remember. From my perspective as police chief, the current bylaws are a roadblock to those processes, as they are archaic, disorganized, and do not reflect many of the town's operational and administrative changes. As an example, the dog officer, now the animal control officer, is no longer under the control or direction of the police department. The Board of Health is the controlling department, with the police department acting in a supportive role. Pet-related issues are often very emotionally charged, and finding a solution can be quite complex. We found that private attorneys can become involved and have previously pointed to our deficient bylaws as a defense to their clients that they represent. A comprehensive bylaw has long been needed to protect the town and serve as the general guideline for how to handle many complaints that continue to upset our residents regarding regulation, care, control, and treatment of animals here in Auburn. There is an important attachment to the current bylaws called the Traffic Rules and Regulations. Within that document, there's a comprehensive section that mirrors and enhances Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 90, as well as the Code of Massachusetts Regulations, which govern driving and parking violations here in the town of Auburn. It's clear that this bylaw was intended to serve as an alternative enforcement option to be utilized on the town's secondary roadways. However, there were never any numerical values assigned to that, which essentially made the bylaw unusable and unenforceable. One of the more frustrating situations for me as the police chief is the licensing and regulation of solicitors, also known as door-to-door salespeople. These people have been known to be very aggressive and pushy, particularly with our more vulnerable populations like our senior citizens, who sometimes have a hard time saying no and can be bullied by these people. Over the years, I've received many complaints from our residents that really don't want solicitors at their door, but my hands have been pretty much tied. The courts have determined that these salespeople have a right to ply their trade at your front door unless there is a local bylaw in effect to more closely regulate their conduct. Unfortunately, contrary to all common sense, previously I've only been allowed to conduct records checks on them at a local level within the state of Massachusetts. Most of these salespeople, however, are from out of state. They are not local people. Many of these salespeople have historically had arrest warrants and serious violent felony convictions in other states that at this point in time I'm procedurally unable to access. This bylaw changes that. This is going to allow us to charge a fee for processing these applicants through our inkless electronic fingerprint machine that will check their names and reveal their true identities and their true criminal records throughout the entire country. The Board of Selectmen is the licensing authority for licenses, vendors, and contracted licenses by the town. The police, in our supportive role of the Board of Selectmen, will be able to use this same system to check those applicants and their employees' criminal histories, thereby allowing the board to make better determinations for the safety of the residents. You can easily imagine a liability to the town should a sex offender or a violent convict be issued a license by the town. Essentially, we become the nexus for providing a predator access to some unsuspecting resident of Auburn by allowing them to go to their house and sell things door to door, and even potentially gain entrance into their house as they try to sell things, or allegedly try to sell things, as the case may be. Further, under the new bylaw, Auburn residents will no longer have to tolerate door-to-door sales persons if they do not want to. If a resident posts a small sign on their door that simply says no solicitors, and the salesperson violates that notice or are pushy, rude, or aggressive, and the resident reports that to me, under the bylaw, I'll now be able to take administrative action up to and including revoking that person's permit or the entire company's permit for that matter. Along the same lines, I'm proposing to regulate through bylaw where level 2 and level 3 sex offenders can reside within the town. On January 21st of 2015, there was an article in the Worcester Telegram and Gazette, which was entitled, Webster Called a Magnet for Sex Offenders, Board Wants New Bylaw. And as neighboring communities to us begin to restrict where sex offenders live through bylaw, I don't want Auburn to be unprotected in that respect. Finally, a bylaw section dedicated to the police will allow our department to make future adjustments as society, technology, and the law changes to ensure that bylaws stay current, effective, and represent the best practices possible. And it's going to be my recommendation to the special town meeting that they approve the final bylaw draft. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to address or answer those. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be the town clerk, Ellen Gaylor.
Good evening, Ellen Gabriel, town clerk. The section 8.01 is a good overview of the administration of the town clerk's office. There are other references throughout the bylaws because of the interaction with the clerk's office with other departments. But since it's better organized and more efficiently or easier to find what you're looking for. I really appreciate that myself, because when you have to search for something when you get a question, it's difficult. Anyway, I really am pleased about the fine and fee schedules, because everything that my office does has a fine or a fee attached to it, and the process of going to town meeting is rather unwieldy and difficult. So I appreciate that it's a yearly review by the Board of Selectmen. Not that the fees will go up necessarily, but at least someone is looking at them on a regular basis, other than just myself. And I think that's all I have.
Anyone have any questions for the town clerk? Thank you, Ellen. Next will be the Department of Development and Inspectional Services, Acting Director, Darlene Coyle.
Thank you, Mark. Darlene Coyle, Inspectional Services. This bylaw is going to help our department in many ways. Some of the changes that have been implemented in this new bylaw under Section 12.01 establishes the Department of Development and Inspectional Services. While this department is fairly new, has been in existence for a little over a couple of years, this actually puts it in the bylaw. Under inspectional services, we have within our scope the health department, animal control, solid waste, building and zoning, planning, business development, conservation, and it encompasses a lot of areas that we're able to make a positive impact to the residents and the business community. Section 12.02 now identifies that the building commissioner will be appointed by the town manager. Formerly, that change came before from the Board of Selectmen, so now under this bylaw, it will be something that Ms. Jacobson will be able to appoint and help our office flow well. Probably the biggest change in this bylaw is going to be the addition of the several animal care sections. So under 12.13, we have a canine care section, and that is going to identify the animal control officer's role and responsibilities as to taking care of a lot of what you might say some kind of hot button issues that come through our office to support what Chief Slucas had mentioned previously. Often we handle very charged situations with involving animals, and having the rules and responsibilities identified here as to what an owner is supposed to provide for a dog really helps us do our job better. Even in the short couple of weeks that we have had with the new animal control officer, we have seen what the old bylaw has lacked and ways that we can improve our function in the office to have the current bylaw and going forward, that clearly identified, such as issues. Often we get many calls in the summertime for people not picking up after their pets, barking dogs. I know that is something that the police also field a lot of calls on. And then determinations for nuisance, dangerous dogs, and so forth. I think all of us are cognizant of many things that are in the news with people that have dogs that may have been aggressive in some nature to make that determination, and how that determination is made. This bylaw supports the Mass General laws and those rules that go along with that, having dogs restrained and being able to identify, what's required for permitting. Again, through the kennel portion of the bylaw under the animal care 12.14, number 11. This really helps us clarify as to what is required under kennel permitting. So it works in conjunction with the town clerk. So when they're issuing permits, what's expected for that permit. So this bylaw will actually help us operate a whole lot better. And now that we have a full-time animal control officer, it essentially should help the town and its residents. I do support the fact that having a clearly identified fine and fee schedule will also help enforce these rules while making it clear for people to understand what responsibilities they have, and failure to hold on to those responsibilities and the enforcement that follows. This really is an improvement from what we had from years ago. So I thank the committee for taking the time to move this forward. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
There being none, thank you, Darlene.
Thank you.
We'll now hear from the Department of Public Works Director on the Department of Public Works and Stormwater Management. Bill Coyle.
Good evening. Thank you, Mark. Bill Coyle, DPW Director. The changes to the bylaw relative to the Department of Public Works are outlined in Chapter 13. And many of these changes, as mentioned by the town manager, are a result of the reorganization plan back in May of 2011 with the creation of the DPW. The mention of highway surveyor has been eliminated, and now it's referenced as DPW Director. Relative to changes that we are proposing, and along with the committee, there are several improvements that I see in terms of improving public safety, and also to allow us to have the DPW to have some enforcement in these categories. And they're outlined in Section 13.03, number 1. Without reading the entire section, this is relative to excavation in a public street after it's been paved. This would provide for a 5-year moratorium, so that only emergencies would be allowed after we've paved and reconstructed a roadway. Currently, we do not have that bylaw in place. So when someone comes to me for a road opening permit, I will try to either discourage it to wait until the 5-year period if it's not an emergency. But there are times when somebody may challenge that. So this will give us the authority to disallow that road opening again unless it's an emergency purpose. Additionally, Section 13.041, I'll summarize. No person shall discharge water, snow, ice, or ice which may be subject to freezing on a roadway. The main change in this bylaw is discharging of water, and particularly during the winter months. This has become an issue for the DPW in several locations in town where we have a significant icing problem, and it's obviously a safety issue. Currently, I will go to a property owner and ask them if they can remove the sump pump or whatever they may have that's discharging in the road. And I've had some luck with people that are willing to cooperate, and I'll try to make suggestions on how they can do that. However, there have been instances where people refuse to do that, and it can be costly to the town because we're there constantly providing sand and salt to make it safe, and it's a hazard for the general public. So having this bylaw in place will give us some way of enforcing that so it doesn't happen. And again, that's an improvement for mainly for public safety reasons. Also, Section 13.052, this bylaw is very similar to what's currently there, and it allows for the DPW to perform temporary repairs to private ways. This gets into a little more detail of essentially grandfathering existing private ways and allow for that continued maintenance. We've added language to the type of material that's allowed to allow actual asphalt to be used, because some of our private roadways are paved, so it doesn't make sense for us to put grindings or gravel on a roadway that's paved. So even though we're limited to $5 per linear foot, if there is a hole, and we can go past that with asphalt. So this bylaw allows the use of asphalt where previously it wasn't specifically mentioned. Moving forward, any new private roads, which I'm not really sure if that would actually happen, but if it were to happen, would require, I believe, 2/3 of the residents to support the repair, and I believe also requires selectmen vote to allow that as well. But again, the current private roadways are essentially grandfathered, and that maintenance would continue as it currently does. Section 13.07, this is essentially, it disallows any objects to be placed within the town right of way. One of the issues, actually several issues that we have during the winter months, especially with the storms that we've had recently, with 3 or 4 feet of snow on the ground, it's very difficult for our plow operators to see what's underneath that snow. And there have been instances where we will hit an irrigation system or an irrigation head that's been placed within the town right of way that really shouldn't be there. So what this does is it gives it specifies in the bylaw that the individual who places that item within the right of way is responsible for that item. So if we do hit it and rip it up, they can't come after the town and say, well, you're obligated to repair it when it shouldn't have been there in the first place. It does allow for the DPW director, myself, to allow certain items by permit to be installed within the right of way. There are instances where people would look to construct a retaining wall and where the right of way may be 15, 20 feet back, which can happen, and it's not feasible to have a wall in that location. And I can allow by permit potentially a wall that would be placed behind telephone poles where it wouldn't be hit, because if we were to hit that wall, we would take out all the telephone poles along with it. So there are instances where we would allow items to be placed within the right of way. Mailboxes, there's clarification on what happens if a mailbox is struck by a plow. If we hit a mailbox physically with our plow, we would be responsible for replacement of that mailbox. However, if you have a mailbox that's constructed of granite and may cost $200-300, the bylaw only allows for replacement of a conventional mailbox, and I believe it's limited at just a $30 mailbox at the time. I don't know, and I'd have to look into whether or not if someone were to have one of a granite type mailbox, whether or not if it was struck physically by our plows, whether or not through the insurance company, there's potentially maybe another mechanism for repairing that or replacement. But the intention of this bylaw is specifically for if it's struck. If the mailbox is broken because of a windrow of snow, which is basically the snow casting of the snow, the town is not responsible for that. So essentially, people need to make sure that their mailboxes are structurally sound. We're not going to be responsible if it's knocked over and broken just by the casting of the snow. So those are essentially the main changes within the DPW bylaws. Additionally, the other section of bylaws that fall on the DPW in town engineers, the stormwater bylaws. That's chapter 14, stormwater management. There's very few changes to this bylaw. And this particular bylaw allows for the town to develop stormwater regulations through the Stormwater Committee, which is a public hearing process that still has not yet happened. It will hopefully in the very near future. As mentioned by Lieutenant Maas, this change mainly was from moving this from the zoning bylaws into the town bylaws. I believe there may have been a reference even in previous bylaws to a land use enforcement officer, which no longer exists. So the reviewing authority would be the town engineer or designee, and the appealing authority would be the Stormwater Committee that currently exists. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody may have. Okay,
There being none, thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
We'll hear next from the Glenn Anderson, the Deputy Fire Chief. Glenn Johnson.
Good evening. After review of the Fire Rescue Department's bylaws, it was determined that there were some bylaws that were able to be eliminated, as they are now covered under either the Massachusetts Comprehensive Fire Safety Code or the Mass State Building Code. Of the 7 bylaws that we will be putting forward to town meeting, 4 are existing bylaws and 3 are new. As I give the overview of each bylaw, I will let you know what is currently in place and what is new. Section 16.01, false alarms, police and fire. That's an existing bylaw. The purpose of this bylaw is to reduce the number of false alarms and to promote the reasonable use of alarm devices in the town. Some changes to registration, false alarm fees, and the appeals process were done in that bylaw. 16.02, display of street address numbers on buildings. That's an existing bylaw. This bylaw addresses the specific requirements of the town as per Mass General Law, Chapter 148, Section 59, which requires numbers on buildings. Some changes in there with specific locations, the size, font, and contrasting colors. 16.03, rapid entry key system, key lock system, otherwise known as the Knox box on certain commercial buildings. That's an existing bylaw. This bylaw requires the placement of a Knox key lock box on the exterior of any commercial building that has a fire alarm, fire protection system, or medical alarm system, which transmits an alarm off premise. Some changes, the installation locations and the notification of changing of keys. 16.04, adequate public safety for police and fire, radio coverage in buildings or structures. This is a new bylaw. This bylaw addresses the specific requirements of the town as per the State Building Code 780 CMR, which now requires adequate radio coverage in buildings. This bylaw speaks to the types of buildings that is required, it's required in and addresses. It addresses the following: minimum signal level and strength, types of cable and antenna systems, public safety frequencies, owners' responsibilities with the system. (16.05) Carbon dioxide permitting and detection. This is also a new bylaw. This bylaw would require the review and permitting with the installation of a liquefied carbon dioxide system within a building. This will ensure that the proper detection and notification systems are in place to protect the occupants of the building. There would be types of systems that require a permit, pre-alarm, and alarm thresholds. 16.06, general hazard materials. This is an existing bylaw. This bylaw was adopted by the town originally under home rule powers to protect the public health and welfare of the residents and business owners. Its purpose is to protect, preserve, and maintain the existing and potential groundwater supply, groundwater recharge areas, and surface water from contamination of hazardous materials. In the current bylaw, it stands alone. It's a standalone bylaw that does not make the enforcement authority clear. This bylaw has been removed under the fire rescue section, and the enforcement authority is now shared between the department, between us, the fire rescue department, and the Department of Inspectional Services. It defines hazardous materials, discusses storage of flammable fluids, registration requirements, above and below ground storage requirements. 16.07, cisterns and dry hydrants. This is a new bylaw. In an effort to follow Mass General Law, Chapter 148, Section 28, which is to provide adequate safety requirements for the protection of the public in the event of a fire in or about any building, structure, or other premises. This bylaw would require the installation of a fire protection, dry hydrant, or underground cistern in any subdivision of 8 or more lots, business enterprise parks, and general industry developments where there is insufficient public and/or private water supply to meet the minimum fire flows required by NFPA 1141. Any questions?
Thank you, Glenn. Does anyone have any questions of the committee? Is there any other business to come before the committee? Entertain a motion to close the hearing. Second. All those in favor? Aye. Entertain a motion to dissolve our meeting. Second. All those in favor? The hearing is closed and our meeting is closed. Thank you very much for coming out tonight.